Okay, we'll get started. A few quick announcements of some upcoming events. The 2019 Black in Design Conference, Black Futurism, is happening this Friday through Sunday in Gun Hall. So the tickets for the conference are now available online. Also, this Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, there will be a talk between Michelle Chang and K. Michael Hayes in the library on Michelle's installation titled A Hole in the Wall. So please come. But I'm excited to welcome Angela Pang and Shiozaki Taishin, who together with Sanquan were the co-curators of the Shinohara Kazuo ModerNext exhibition, which sadly will come down in about 10 days. Time flies. And many of you might remember the conversation between Kazuo Sejima and Sanquan earlier, about a month ago, reflecting on Shinohara. And then I think there were a lot of issues that were discussed. We talked about the genealogy of the Shinohara school, about this particular exhibition, which Sejima herself says she has never seen. A lot of the work that was exhibited here she has never seen in Japan, although she was part of the Shinohara school. So I think it's very important that the GSD is hosting this part of his work here. Today's discussion, I think, is titled Unpacking. I think both Taishin and Angela will talk about not only the history of Shinohara's work, but also the design of his exhibition and the reception of his work. Angela is the principal of PangArchitects in Hong Kong, and she teaches at Cornell. And prior to establishing an office in 2010, she had worked for Rafael Moneo and SANAA. Her recent projects includes a landscape of columns in tower design that was exhibited in last year's Venice Biennale. She was the runner-up of an international competition to pedestrianize the busy artery in the Hong Kong Central Business District. And many other projects include the library and the student hostel for the Chinese University in Hong Kong. Shiozaki Taishin is Associate Professor of Architecture at the Tokyo Institute of Technology, and he was once a member of the laboratory of Okuyama Shin'inchi. Together with Kobayashi Saeco, he's the principal of the office Atelierco, and amongst many award-winning projects are the La Cienega and Cafe, the Longhouse, and recently completed an installation in urban density in Melbourne, Australia. Between 2003 and 2006, Shiozaki worked with Shinohara on a series of design projects, and most notably the house in Tateshina, his last project that's in our exhibition out here. And he also co-edited the monographic issue of Japan Architect, Kazuo Shinohara, Complete Works on Original Publications from 2014. So please join me to welcome Angela and Taishin.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introducing, Mark. I'm Taishin Shiozaki. I'm an architect and teaching at Tokyo Institute of Technology. Firstly, I would say again, thank you very much for all professors and students and all of the staffs, and Mark, Angela, and Sanquan. I'm very happy to talk about Professor Shinohara Sensei here. Yes, I'm a little bit scared for his voice from the sky. I don't know how do you think about Shinohara. He's maybe mysterious a little bit because it is difficult to get his monograph in foreign country. So today I want to try to tell something about him. So please listen carefully, otherwise my English pronunciation is so bad. But sometimes, only sometimes maybe I will tell you important something, so please catch that. So the reason why I'm talking about him here is that I'm almost last student of him and helped his late period work, including house in Tateshina project. So today I want to tell you about three things: his works and his strategies, and the sketches, especially about house in Tateshina. So this is his career. He originally started as mathematician. Actually, he became a lecturer of math, and then he changed his career and studied architecture after that in Tokyo Tech. I started to help him around 2000. So in that period, he already closed his laboratory and atelier as well. And this is a list of his one-man show, one-man exhibition. So he already had 2 times or 3 times in US, New York and New Haven and somewhere. And so this is a 4th exhibition in US. There is now, because of this exhibition, there is so many Shinohara fans all over the world. For example, the Christian Carles joined the exhibition in Paris. So now he is a very deep fan for Shinohara. So now we are calling them Shinohara Mania or Shinohara Mafia. So Angela and Senkwan and maybe Mark Lee also the member of Mafia. So this is all of his works. The left side is residential and right side is more bigger project. So not so many. He classified his own project into 4 styles by himself, like Picasso. So it is very narcissistic. In first style, he focused on Japanese tradition, like he using the word frontality and division and connections and abstractions, and made this kind of Japanese tradition, like but very abstract, detailed project. This is one of his masterpieces, House in White. And this is the House of Earth. And next, in the second style, he focused on the distance from modernism, and he made his own modernism. He constructed his own stream of works and changed to use cubic volume without eaves, using word the Fisher space, and this is an uncompleted house. So today I just quickly show you the several pictures. This is repeating crevasse. Please review in the exhibition later. And this is in third style. He focused on the urban situations, especially using the word of semiology, the naked space, 0-degree machine, and hot meaning and cold meaning, and wildness, savage, etc. So from this period, he visited many, many countries. You can see his travel photograph in the exhibition. He likes the kind of feeling of street and human shadow from this period. I'm sorry, so quick slides. Okay, in fourth style, today we want to focus on the ModerNext. The keyword is basically during this styles. So he used the word progressive anarchy or the concept of discreteness of elements. This is a National Theater. This is police stations. This is Eurario, Helsinki, and Yokohama Port Terminal. So this orange is an unbuilt project. So in the fourth style, most of works is not built. And this is, you can see the structures. Red is wooden timber structures, and blue is reinforced concrete structures, and yellow is steel. And finally, the house in Tateshina is wooden structures. And next part is about his strategy. Every time the Shinohara sensei made a strategy with making sort of enemy. So this is most famous, his aphorism, house is a work of art. In this period, he also mentioned, for example, produce fictional space beautiful. make a beautiful fictional space or something. He used very beautiful photogenic images. So that is why many people think, okay, he made a beautiful house. That is why he said, my house is art or something. That is okay for him maybe, but basically the background is a little bit different. So he said in 1960s, this was, so Japan had a high growth of the economy, and after World War II, the population is growing up and the economy is growing up, and they have to make so many houses. And in that period, he also said, even if the site is not beautiful, architect must design house beautiful. Or even if the site is beautiful or not, large or small, architect must not start from such a chance conditions. And architect must not design for the client. Can you say that? But of course, he designed for the client, definitely. But that makes sense in some part, because if we accept every client's demand, the result cannot become the client's demand. So house is a work of art means, for example, the many architects tried to make the compact house after World War II. Of course, they need a compact house, many houses. But he used the aphorism, the larger house, the better. Or that period, Japan had industrializations, so the houses as well. Many housemakers make repeating module type houses. So he wanted to fight against that kind of stream. So he designed the house, umbrella house. He went many times to the project site, and in the snow season, the project site is far from the stations. So he thinks, what is this troublesome work? So many works to design just one house. So he thinks, maybe the work of house must be art. Otherwise, what a troublesome works. So if the house is art, we can fight against industrializations. So this kind of things is the background of house is a work of art. So every time he tried to fight against existing concept. So in the ModerNext part, it is the same. So he used, for example, progressive anarchy. So in this period, many architects or many persons said Tokyo city is ugly or European city is beautiful. But he mentioned about chaos from the mathematician's idea or something. Chaos have the beautifulness or something. And confusion is, sometimes it becomes beautiful. So he also mentioned the village community of today will not exemplify harmony as such, but will invoke a beauty of confusions. He took this kind of photograph of Shibuya. And he likes the images of the machine. This is a NASA space machines, something. And he likes this kind of F-14 fighters. He also mentions, I want to let the beautiful Buddha statue put on F-14. This means a beautiful Buddha statue is a sort of metaphor for the traditions. And F-14 is a maybe machine. It is his own modernism, not original modernism. He thinks about the relationship between the elements, then That kind of metaphor is 14. So we do not have that time enough, so I skip that. But anyway, every time he made this kind of short aphorism during his design architecture. So finally, I show you the sketches a little bit. This is house in Tateshina project. His final project. This is his own second house. Very, very small house. This is the smallest project. It looks very simple, but it has quite complicated things in it and very calculated. Okay. This is the 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 models in the exhibitions in Shanghai. This is me, like this. Yeah, this is interior. Oh, sorry, many. This is the model for the exhibition. This is the real one. Again, sketches. This is the very beginning sketches of house in Tateshina. So this is quite Shinohara style sketches. So many lines for one line. He repeatedly draw the line and try to find the correct line or something. How to say? This symposium named Unpacking, named by you? I don't know the Sen. He's not here. So I didn't know that until 1 week ago. And the unpacking means then the Sen asked me to talk about sketches. So the sketches, if our body is packed, unpacking is to produce something. I don't know, but the sketches is interesting. So if this is a body and pencil can be body and line can be body, or if we threw the ball is body, but if that was detached from me, maybe for the pitcher of the baseball player, the ball should be the steel body or something. Just I want to say that for sketches, maybe the line is still me, but sometimes Shinohara try to ask the line, please tell me the final answer. Every time Shinohara said, this is the real, the architecture project is the real, so please do the real and find the answer. So he also used solved. Oh, this is solved. That means I find it or something. But anyway, so this kind of very repeating lines is one of his style. But at the same time, I want to show you the different types of sketch. Oh, this is the crazy lines. And this is the house in Hanayama number 3 sketches. This is as well. Uehara carved road. This is the Itoshima house. So you can see the many bunch of the lines. But he also made this kind of very flattered, fragmented sketches. He drew from many directions. Every time he put the papers and color pencil beside them, bedside as well, and so maybe some sketches are drawn with lying. Yeah, it's a very incredible sketches. No, yeah. Do you like that? It's a very when my first looking, I was surprised these types of sketches. And gradually these sketches become, so he likes this kind of hard edge primary geometric solids. And so you can find this kind of feeling from the ModerNext project. And gradually that kind of element becomes into one volumes. Yeah, like this. Oh, sorry, the time is. Okay. Well, later, let's talk. Thank you very much.
So this exhibition is the third iteration of the Shinohara exhibitions that we've done. It started in 2014 at the Washington University in St. Louis at the Kemper Museum. Then it went on to the ETH. And they are very different sites. One is a white box in WashU. The other, for those who have been to ETH, would know that kind of staggered plan. And they're also very different in section. With the Maki designed, Fumiko Maki designed the museum. So it's really a white box, 5 meters tall space. On the right with ETH, it's just normal gallery space. And so with the white box, we tried to be just as neutral as possible and we tried to let the work speak for themselves. So we just applied a very simple grid. And of that, the first, second, third, fourth style are organized in clusters. And then there's the sort of projecting forward at the top, including works from Ishigami-san, Toyo Ito-san. But we wanted it to be not a chronological reading of the exhibition. Therefore, people are encouraged, or at least expected, to sort of meander through this grid. So therefore, you don't really necessarily get a chronological reading of the exhibition, but really you're sort of immersed in the four styles, all sort of at the same time. So this is some of the exhibition photographs of what happened then. And you can see from the tables, each table is designed specifically to how the show is curated. So sometimes we put photographs or drawings together. Sometimes it's just a model. So that sort of gives you a sense of what happened then. And this is the ETH space. But main difference between ETH and the WashU space is that it looks up to a courtyard. And you can see the ceiling is very, very specific. The floor, in this case, as a Jan de Wilder exhibition that came right before us. He started this exhibition as a narrative. Actually, when he made this exhibition, there was a series of different architects that picked up from his interventions. And so that's the carousel that he designed. He pulled up panels from the ceiling, sort of, for example, repeated this, mirrored this from the other side. Then other architects came along and sort of maintained this narrative. This is Kristen Gears from Office. So they made an exhibition also in the space, cut a hole in the wall that Jan had installed, and then also put the silver paper over the white wall. And so this is the plan of ETH gallery, the GTA gallery. This is the wall. Jan de Wilder added this wall as a mirror over that, almost making it like a Christmas tree. And this becomes a special space. And so when we were invited to bring the show from WashU to here, in fact, it was Christian Carrots who invited us to bring the show to the ETH from the Swiss school's tradition of Shinohara, the interest in Shinohara. We actually made a series of studies trying to do something different, but ultimately just realized that the grid actually works the best. And so what we did was a grid, but a non-grid that diffuses through the space and try to orient to the garden in the sense of trying to pick up this kind of reading of the exterior into the interior. And with that, so we rotated at 90 degrees facing the garden, still organized in a similar way. We also tried to pick up on the reflections. So you see, sort of to imply that sort of the space goes on beyond the boundary. that's the entrance. We cut off parts of that wall as a part of the narrative. The travel photos were exhibited in that cabinet. I wanted to bring in some of this conversation of the narrative. The traces of the wall of what we cut off was part of the exhibition. We fill in back the hole that Kristen Gears had cut out. Also, the traces of, see, just this wall being cut off from here and the stickers. So that was what we did back then. But now when we come to the GSD, it was something completely different. We don't have the white cube, which is a perfect sort of space. And then it's also very fragmented. We have columns, we have a donut, we have a lot of doors, which then has this crazy pattern of circulation. So what do you do with a space like that? So this is what we propose to sort of, in a way, interpret Shinohara Sensei's work. And so obviously on the right is an interpretation of the Yokohama House, and on the left is the Centennial Hall. Just in comparison to the kind of space we have to handle. So this is the model we made. So you can see we wanted to have a very intimate space here to contrast and also to organize the GSD sort of really long corridor. So the main entrance, you come in here, immediately you get large photos. We have had design meetings with Shiozaki-san and Okuyama-san in Tokyo, and this was something that was very important to show Shinohara Sensei's work, which is to have these large photographs anchoring the exhibition. So to contrast that, then we have the cabinet here, which then are from the first and the third styles. So these are some of the model photographs that we made as we were studying what the space would look like. And again, we wanted to create a sense of framing as you go through the space. I mean, I was a student here and I fully understand the sort of fragmentation and the large scale of the space. So this, again, is the intention to sort of carve and sculpt the space. So to explain the organization briefly, this is where you enter with the large photos right here of the third style. So the one and third style coming in from this entrance, you would come into this cabinet where you get 1 to 3rd style. You also get a sense of the travel, you get a view of the travel photos to see how that inform his work. And from here, you get a view towards the main theme of the show, which is ModerNext. So this part is a ModerNext unbuilt project. This part is the ModerNext built project, and then you anchor that with the Centennial Hall. In the process of that, we had to study very closely each wall, how they work together. So these are some of the examples of what we went through, just really looking at each piece that should be included, such as this, just to look at the relationship between the other pieces as we were going through the curation of the show. We also had to obviously study the height of the model stand, the relationship with the vitrines with the models and how they look together in order to achieve a very clean and organized appearance. So this is something I want to bring in sort of briefly about the GSD. We were very fortunate to use the fabrication shop, to use the CNC to fabricate the construction. So these are some of the photographs showing how just being able to relate back to the school, a very genuine collaboration. So you can see these are all just CNC from your fabrication shop as we construct the installation. As with this one, these arcs as we built this cabinet, construction workers just working really hard, climbing up to plaster that. So these are some of just quickly some views to show you what I've seen actually in Instagram, actually. I didn't take these photographs. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Well, thank you, Taishin and Angela. I love the quote about house is a work of art, and I think of the GSD. There's so much work at the GSD, and it's so troublesome. Just GSD must be a work of art, I think, by extension. And also the it's great seeing the design work of Angela, not only of this show, but putting it in context with the previous shows. I always think that architecture exhibitions is so important to experience it. It's not just a conveyance of information, but experiencing architecture is always a difficult task. And I think I really love the intervention, the architectural scale interventions that not only become a backdrop for the work, for the material, but also engages what you say is a difficult space in itself. So maybe I'll start the discussion or the question about Shinohara, the reception of Shinohara. I learned of Shinohara's work as a student was from the Tokyo Centennial Hall, So I appreciated it, but it wasn't like something that was striking. For me, it was very much part of the milieu, very much part of what's happening in the 80s with Isozaki, with Ito and such. I didn't really know of the work until I started teaching in Switzerland, the early work. And especially the group of people from the Graubünden, Andreas de Platzes, they were teaching Shinohara's early work in the construction classes. And the interesting thing that for me about him as a character that Taishin talked about was he's a mystical figure. Huh? He's always there's not many books that were published of his work. The books were published, the photographs were very controlled. It's very curated by him. So it's always a combination of a lack of information together with this type of mysticism. Another thing about his work is that, about him perhaps, is that he always seems to go against the trend. Huh? He always he's an iconoclast. So when metabolism was happening, he would say, I'm not a metabolist. So he always was something that was going against the stream. That makes him kind of interesting that way. So I would love to hear your comments on it, but also I'd like to hear about what you think about this fourth phase in relationship with what's going on around Japanese architecture or international architecture of that period. A moment when he was receiving larger scale commissions, more work, has more international exposure, and certainly was decidedly different from the previous periods. But I'd love to hear Taishin or Angela comment on it.
As you mentioned, Shinohara always limited the everything. I mean for the photographs for publishing, he limited only this photograph and this photograph. So that's because maybe he thinks. The photograph is that kind of unreal images becomes real, and that's more important because especially he designed private houses, so no one can enter it. So the kind of unreal images are quite important for him, and some books also after print.
Yeah.
So every publishers and every person want to have the second edition or something, but he created at times.
He refused a second print or second edition.
Yeah, he did not accept for the second print. That is why now everyone cannot get his information. But that is his strategy. And,
What about in the fourth period, though? Do you think certain thing has changed beyond the style of work itself?
I'm not sure, but from fourth style, he started to design the annex project.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting point because until fourth style, he cannot find the methodology to design the relationships between his former design and the new design. So, for example, House in White has an annex.
Right.
But that annex was designed by his students. So after fourth style, he started the many annex projects.
Right. I mean, I think this is something that's quite fascinating in the show itself because some of the annex projects are in the show, like the addition to the Ukiko-e Museum which is not that far apart between the first phase and the second phase, or the Higashi Tamagawa complex, the annex to the repeating crevice, or the annex to the uncompleted house. There are many projects that he added on to his earlier projects to engage in this dialogue with his former self. And I think from the outside, we always think, is it like, looking at the project themselves superficially, seems like it's almost no regard to like almost adding to someone else's project, you know? But I'm curious about, like, did he turn the page every time he moved on to another style? Because this question of the quality of the work is much discussed during this last month that it's been up, you know, with many guests and many critics and many students.
In good or bad?
Controversial.
Oh.
You know, with discussions with Eric Lapierre and Kirsten Gears, you know, which are your favorites? You know, like Dome is easy to categorize as a favorite project. The Tateshina is very easy. You know, it's closer to the second and third period. I think the Second National Theater is harder. You know, so it becomes more uneven. And then, but because so many people had such faith in Shinohara, they said, well, it must be good. It would be good because he did so much work. He can't really create a monster, you know.
Well, you know, I've always been curious, the transformation from 1, 2, 3 style to 4 and then ModerNext. It's curious to know whether or not it was something he deliberately transforms himself to an urban scale,
Right.
or if it just comes to him. That,
Right.
say, he was invited to the competition,
Right.
or he was invited to Euralegal. If that kind of urban scale came naturally, or he chose to do it, I
Right.
think that was something I was curious about.
So from fourth style, his project becomes bigger and bigger.
Right.
So
Right.
that is why it is easy to think about his thought becomes more urban scale, but actually maybe he started the relationship between project and urban actual situation is more earlier, and of course from third style he tried to extract some characteristics of urban situations and
Right.
designed into his project. But he mentioned about the chaos in the urban situation from the first style. So every time he thinks about our feeling in the urban style, urban situations.
Right. So it also coincides, dealing with the urban situation as opposed to suburban situations, dealing with the larger scales versus smaller scales, also coincided with, I would say, a more additive approach than a subtractive approach. I would say the earlier work was more subtractive, more singular.
Or dissecting.
Dissecting,
right.
yeah.
That's the word he uses when he talks about his first style.
Right.
That you have it traces to the traditional house,
Right.
right? Something like Payan, the tea ceremony,
Yeah.
pavilion, the little house,
Right.
where there's a clear composition of how the plan is.
Dividing, dissecting, yeah. A division,
So he uses the
Yeah.
word dissecting, and if you look at the plan, there's between house in white and
Right.
Taiwan, that actually they're very there are similarities one could draw
Right.
visually, at least in the plan.
And what about this fourth style then? Do you think that dissection or the division is still there, or is it more like there was a period when people were interested in collages and such, you know? And
Well,
I'm
in the way
curious
he
to-
talked about Yokohama House, and maybe
Yeah.
Shiozaki-san can correct me.
Right.
The way that he talked about the Yokohama House, his own house,
Right.
because there's already an existing building next to the site. So
Right.
it was always, the way that he decided to use the semicircle, is that the semi-barrel, half-barrel vault configuration. It was a reaction towards that. And I guess just from looking volumetrically, there's these sort of moments where he sort of pops it out and
Yeah.
carve it in. And if you look closely in the model, actually at the exhibition, I only discovered that through looking at the model and trying to photograph the model. They're in between space between the Yokohama House and the existing building is extremely interesting because there's also a slope.
It's
So
narrow, right?
Yeah.
Basically,
It's this narrow slit. It's almost a little bit picking up from second and third style too. So this is actually really beautiful. So I encourage you to. I photographed that model many times. before the vitrine came. So,
I mean, maybe Taishin can also talk a little bit about about the Tateshina house, being the last project, and also, I mean, looking at it, people relate it more maybe to the Tanikawa house, both from the morphology of the roof and also the land coming in. Could you talk about this in relationship to this fourth period or fourth style?
Yes, during I helped the project of house in Tateshina. Shinohara sensei already every time mentioned about he is looking the both of first style and fourth style, especially about house in White and house in Yokohama. Yeah. And he mentioned finally he extracted something from the house in White. So I don't know why, but in the final his last project he tried to go back to the first style. I don't know how do you feel that, but anyway he designed with the methodology of the fourth style, and that is a balance of the geometrical elements. And finally, he tried to combine many elements into one project and make some new geometrical something.
Well, maybe one more question before we take some questions, if there are any from the audience. I'm curious, both of you are architects. Huh? I'm curious what you think in terms of how being closely knowledgeable or involved with Shinohara, if you feel that any either direct or indirect influences, whether on your work or on your approach to architecture.
Please? It's difficult.
Yeah. Because actually, I was looking at a project, and recently, I won't mention the architect, but basically it's a copy of the Prism house. I don't know if you know of that. And then there's a copy of the Tanikawa house, and they put it together. To the extent I'll say it's a Chilean architect. And so it's interesting that...
I'm worried about you talking about me.
No. And so it's interesting to see contemporary architect taking literally Shinohara Sensei's work and sort of interpret and appropriate, I guess is the word, their own. And sometimes it's difficult to appreciate because you feel like there's, it's so easy to take the appearance of something and transport that. But it's so important to be able to sort of take it your own, right?
Right.
And if you look at, say, Sejima-san's work, it's never about just taking what Shinohara Sensei did and then making it look like it, right? So I think that even from the way that Shinohara Sensei interprets a traditional Japanese house, it's never just about taking it. So it's that abstraction process and is extremely important.
The abstraction process.
So the Professor Shinohara is my teacher's teacher's teacher. So I have to say, of course, I have the influence from him. But it's quite difficult. What is important for me? But maybe everyone is same. But when I started to learn architecture, I just wanted to design architecture, but gradually got the knowledge about him and his students, Professor Sakamoto or Professor Okuyama. I learned to name the space, to make the space name. He used a lot of text and he named something into his own design. So that was very attractive for me. So my doctor's thesis is the kind of coined word, coined spaces. So from that every time when I design some spaces and some houses, every time I think about how do I call this space, that kind of things. It's maybe influence.
I mean, I think that's great to hear because I'm also attracted to Shinohara's work, certainly because of the strength of the project. There's also this interest between vernacular and something abstract and more modern. He balances it very well. But I also think there's a kind of humanism in his work, a kind of mediation between humanism and geometry. I love how the geometry of the square and the center, because of the division, but the center is still there. So it completely offsets. It makes the space humanized. It makes the square humanizes the square. And I think that was a tension that's very different from a Western way of maybe deconstructing the symmetry or deconstructing the center. It's much less contrived. That's something that brings it into a different dimension for me. But I also like how you said that he was your teacher's teacher's teacher. Some of you that were in the studio lottery, you might remember Go Hasegawa, who said he taught here, I think, 3-4 years ago. And then when he came here, the exhibition was the Atelier Bow Wow, and Yoshiharu Tsukamoto was his teacher. And then this time when he came, it's this exhibition. He said, Shinohara is always looking down at me from the sky, which you also mentioned. So he sounds a bit scary. Anyway, can we take some questions from the audience? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, go ahead. Oh, maybe take a mic so it can be recorded. These things.
So, it's like every time I hear about Shinohara's name, the first thing popped up is the four styles, and I'm curious about when did he summarize these styles? Did the theory guide his practice, or the practice came after, or the theory came after his practice?
Of course, I'm not sure, but maybe the practice and theory every time run the parallel. So every time he was said he is mathematicians. So I don't know about of course there is 4 styles, and every style has strong relationships. So when he changed the styles, there is a reason, and there is a kind of, jump from previous theory. So every time he thinks about his story, his otherwise you normal people cannot use the word styles for his own works, right? So I think every time he thinks about that kind of strategy.
But when did he name these styles? Is it in retrospect, like named much later, or when looking back?
From the beginning of third style, he used the word style.
Beginning of third style, he go back and categorize the first style and the second style.
Yeah, in the second style, he just used my next style or something.
I see.
That makes sense?
Thank you for the talk. I was wondering about the legacy of the open box, closed box, opening of the closed box. That was, I think, brought up in the conversation with Sejima, but also, I think, relevant to the way in which you describe the transition between the second and third styles and the introduction of chaos and the kind of urban. So to me, that comes up in like Sakamoto, for example, and perhaps in other examples of architecture. To me, in Shinohara, it's a geometric transformation, and in other works, it's a different kind of transformation. I'm just curious if that's a long legacy. in the same way that you talk about the different generations.
Long legacy in Japanese architecture.
Yeah, and talking about, the opening of the closed box as the introduction of urbanism into a kind of tradition of architecture.
So I don't know he didn't use the word open box and closed box. Well, of course, generally he used, but especially Professor Sakamoto used that kind of closed box in 70s. So the architects in 70s in Japan, most of architects tried to make the microcosmos or something into the one house. They have to separate, and they have to make the independent world in the house against for the very messy urban situations. In that period, Shinohara also tried to make his own meaning house, or he used the word the space for meaning or something. So in that meaning, he also designed a closed something, and he did not open the house maybe, but he every time thinks about the house is overlapped from the surrounding space. He used the word second nature or something to call the inner space. Make sense?
The closed box is also beyond the geometry. It's also literally when you're in there, you're closed. I mean, the windows are translucent; they're not transparent. This whole hermeticism is there. Where do you think is the transition? Did it happen in the larger scale projects already in Tanikawa project when the site is already cutting through the project? Do you think that this kind of closed cosmos versus this openness, or do you think it's always there?
So in Tanikawa house, he just used that kind of slope as a element of the house. That slope, that angle and angle of the slope and angle of the roof, and the columns and the beams and the kind of elements he used. The house is just a house, and angle is just an angle, and try to make that kind of balance in the South style. And gradually he shifted to use more geometrical shape. It is maybe abstraction from the element of house or element of urban situations. Then he tried to deal with the kind of primary geometric things. But especially the big project and house project is almost same in his design, I guess. He always says house is concentrations of design architecture or something.
House is a concentration of design architecture.
So for his design, there is no differences, maybe.
Right. I mean, I was just a comment, because this is something that I think as designers and architects always question and struggle with, the issue of scale. When certain things work for certain scales, when it's a larger scale, it stops working. Like Marubota. I shouldn't mention names, sorry. Sorry. But when you go up to a different scale, something else needs to come in. So this was the discussion, I think, at the Charlottesville or Chicago tapes. They talked about abstraction. Abstraction, 3 stories, 4 stories is okay. 6 stories, it becomes overbearing. So it's interesting to see a lot of these projects in his 4th period or 4th style that's not materialized.
And what would those quality of the projects be? I mean, we see the police station, or we see some projects like K2 that are not in the exhibition, but I think the question is still lingering. Yeah.
I think to sort of pick up a little bit from the open and closed box that you were mentioning, and if I may just add some specific comments, is if you look at, say, the turn from second style to third style, the last project of the second style is the Prism House, and then if you look at Prism House to the Tanikawa House. So Prism House is a sharp 45 degrees and then a wall, right? So that actually is a very sort of, if I may, more of a clear geometry in that sense. But when he went to, I mean, if it wasn't for Seijo House and Prism House, I believe that Tanikawa House is a progression if you understand his work. And so if you look at Tanikawa House, right, he was given this slope, and the way he relates to the slope is just to use a 45 degrees angle, right? So it's a right angle at the top and then just 45 degrees. And so he let the house the geometry respond to the slope. Wherever it stops, right? So there's this sense of like letting geometry being almost like a law of nature, the way that it responds to the slope.
Yeah.
As opposed to manipulating, right?
Yeah.
And so the moment where it almost reaches the ground, there's a slit where nature comes in. So that kind of relationship, if you look at that, it's very different.
That's the magic for me. That's the magic for House in White for me. You know,
Right,
the
right.
geometry, just divide and then
Right,
be,
right.
You know.
So sometimes, like I have the opportunity just to look at the sketches outside on the note of sketches, because in the moment we were installing installation, there was a day, literally just half a day, where they weren't doing anything with the sketches. So I just took those sketches with me, went to the special collection, and I just took a look each one by myself. It was actually a magical moment, because you would never be able to have access to just your own to these. And when they are not in the frame, they're so much more beautiful. So anyway, they are beautiful as they are on the walls, but you almost feel like there's almost like, you know, he was there and you could have a conversation.
Voice in the sky. Did you clean your hands, Angela?
I know, right? I was thinking about that. So no, what I want to say was, you know, and you can see even in the way he construct his sketches, when you look at them, each piece was a composition. Like when we do sketches, we just sketch, right? And we don't really think about the sheets, but even in the examples you've shown, it's so well composed as a drawing. And I think that's deliberate, right? It's just the way it's positioned on the piece of paper. And of course the strokes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, actually, I have never seen just the he sketch.
Oh.
After he sketched, yeah, I just see the. So in the meeting for the project, he brings the sketches from somewhere, and please see, and how to say I cannot get that sketch. Just trace the sketches and bring back. Otherwise,
He keeps
keeps
the sketches.
yeah. No, so otherwise someone sell something. So just a copy.
Oh,
But
he
what?
makes a Xerox and show you the copy, not the real thing.
No real things.
Oh.
Or sometimes he already prepared the copies in convenience store or something.
Oh.
He just keep the originals. And after he passed away, every sketch is. Firstly, we see then the sketches of house in Tateshina. There is more than 800 sketches. 800 during 10 years or something.
10 years.
Because that project site was bought by him in his when he was a student. He started to rent that site. Then after how many years? I don't know
More than 10.
Yeah.
Tateshina, the first sketch Intersecting volumes. Did they, was the elevation also pitch roof or no? Or was it just plan at that time?
Just plan.
Just plan,
yeah.
okay.
There is so many types, and
Yeah.
well, most of them are very not so good. But finally, he
Finally, okay.
reached that kind of thing.
Do you think he ever intended it to be built? Or was it just an ongoing sort of investigation and struggle with finding the perfect project?
In case of house in Tateshina?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course he wanted to build,
Yeah.
and yeah, that project is actually was moving, but before starting the constructions, he passed away.
Okay, well, thank you very much again. It's great.
Thank you.